Hi guys, welcome back to Heyybritny. Today we are going to be covering the Vahalla murders on Netflix. So let's just get into why I wanted to watch this show. I mentioned in the last podcast episode that I did that I had started to watch crime and thriller type of TV shows on Netflix. And so this was actually maybe like the second show that I watched. So I watched this one before Paranoid. The reason why I wanted to watch this show was because I'm obsessed with Vikings, and so I saw Valhalla in the title, and I was just curious on what it was about and what it would be like compared to like the old school Viking TV shows that I saw. So anyway, let's go ahead and get into season one of the Valhalla Murders. So again, we're going to be covering the top 5 plot points. So let's go ahead and start with plot point 1. So we have 2 men who are murdered, and we eventually learn that these murders are connected. So both men are tortured, and we also know that they have cuts over their eyes. This is something that the detectives and the cops want to keep out of the press, out of the public's awareness, and so we know instantly right away that these two are connected and there's something bigger happening here. We also have a new detective, Arne, who is brought in to kind of help with everything that's happening. Katka is the main character of this TV show, and she was up for promotion, but she was denied it in favor of Helga, and so she's kind of sour about that. And then here we have this new detective coming in from a different country and kind of assisting them with this investigation because it has gotten so big at this point. The second major plot point is that we have Kari who is in trouble, and then we're learning about Arne's weird family history. So Kari is Katja's son. She, I think, is divorced or not with his father, and his father is dating someone else, and so they have issues with Kari at this point. He's partying and stuff like that, and so they're really trying to rein him in. And then Katja finds out about this video that's going around the school, and the video is of a girl being assaulted, and so Katka, once she sees this video, she's kind of suspicious of her son, being that she's dealing with this intense crime, and it's just really affecting her judgment and what she's thinking of the people in her everyday life. And so it eventually comes out that Kari is actually a witness, not a perp, and so because of how Katja moved in regards to this situation, it has caused some friction between her and her son, and so he wants to move in with his father, and so she's just dealing with that. And then one thing that I want to point out about this happening is that Katja wasn't sure how involved her son was, and she kind of overstepped as a police officer because she looked up the paperwork basically for a case that she wasn't involved with, and then she also went to the victim's home to kind of question her and basically figure out how involved her son was. And so this was bad on her end because she was clearly pressuring the girl that she was interviewing for information, and then she only stopped once the mom was like, enough, enough, we're done here, and things like that. And so she really is kind of losing her grip on the people around her and how much she trusts them. We also see that she has friction with her mother as well. Now, moving to Arne, we know that he has some kind of complex, complicated family history. We know that he also has a close relationship with Magnus, who was the one who brought him in to assist with this investigation. And so we know that his dad is in bad health, and Arne is being, instructed, coached, encouraged to go see his father, and he does go see him, but I don't think he really says much. And then we also know that Arne's sister is reaching out to him, contacting him, trying to get in touch with him. And so we find out that he has been exiled from the family and that his family is kind of part of this religious group. I think they're Jehovah's Witnesses. I'm not 100% sure, but we find out that he's also exiled from the religious group as well. We do later on see the scene where he is intimate with a man, and so I'm not sure if he is gay or if this is just something that he does on the side, but I'm assuming that this is part of the reason why he has been exiled from his family and the religious group. We also get this weird sense that his sister, and this confirmed later on, that his sister is kind of being held hostage by the religious group and specifically by her husband. He's scolding her for contacting her brother, and then he's really kind of acting very paternal with her, very controlling, and it's just a weird dynamic. And we do see this moment where Honor goes to her house and he's kind of trying to convince her to leave her husband, leave with him. And so we see Honor get in a fight with the husband, and it seems like everything's kind of going downhill for him from there. Moving on to the third plot point, we realize that there is a connection between the two murders that have happened and the Vahalla school. For the first two victims, there were photographs connected to them, and we realized that they had some sort of connection, and so the cops were able to realize that there was a pattern of employees at the Vahalla school being targeted. Once this pattern has been established, Katja and Honor, they go and visit the school because they realize that there's a woman who has been missing. She also worked at the school, and so the local cop ends up going to the school just to check it out, I think, and then he finds the body. And so that gets Katja and Honor down at that area to kind of investigate further. And so now at this point, we know that 3 people have been attacked, and they all worked at that Vahalla school. So what is it about the school that is causing former employees to be killed? And so what we learn is that there's a history of torture and abuse at the school. There were several investigations into the school. The victims weren't believed by the authorities, and so we know that there's some sort of thing happening where the truth has been buried for some reason. And so what this is hinting at is some sort of cover up. And so we do see this scene where the victims come forward. They're on a news show. They're being interviewed and asked to talk about their experience at Vahalla, and they talk about how brutal it was, how insane it was, what happened to them. And I think we learned that one of the boys actually tried to run away, and he was missing and he's never been found. And this is Tommy, and so the implication is that he was killed for trying to escape. We also learned from someone in jail that another student killed Tommy, but then we realized the truth that this is not true. He wasn't killed by another student. He was killed by the adults at the school who were taking advantage of the children and abusing them to cover up what was happening. And so we do see this moment where Tommy's parents are notified that the body that they had found 30 years prior is actually their son, and they're able to confirm this through a DNA test. And so the family's really upset about this because for 30 years they had no idea what happened to their son, and then now they realize, we found him all those years ago. And then the father has some guilt because the boy Tommy had come to him and told him in confidence, hey, something's happening, and he didn't believe him. And so the family feels a lot of guilt over what happened. This leads to Tommy's dad attacking another student who was at the school and really just trying to get justice for his son. The fourth major plot point, we have Magnus's connection outed on the live news show. And so Magnus is basically Katja's boss. He is really involved with the investigation. And so with Katja going to Valhalla and the city that it's in and just doing investigation, really digging into things, they find out that Magnus was actually involved when they were trying to figure out what happened to Tommy. So he investigated a family who lived nearby on a farm because Tommy would cut across their land to escape. And so they realized that a cop was at the school, but it wasn't in any of the paperwork. And so they're trying to figure out, what's happening, what's going on. And then they find out that the police report about Tommy being missing was actually written by someone else, but it has like the police chief's name on it as if he wrote it. And so this leads to them figuring out that Magnus is involved. He had a history at the school, but he never disclosed it as they were working the investigation of the initial 2 murders. And so he basically has some questions to answer. And so Katja, working with the local cop to put together a request to investigate Magnus. It gets shut down at the highest level. They're not getting any answers, and so Katja goes to confront the judge who they sent the request to, and even he doesn't know who denied it or why it was denied. And so what Katja does to kind of rectify this is she goes to that journalist and she leaks the documents that she was able to put together, basically show that Magnus was involved in everything that was happening at Valhalla, and it makes him look really bad. This was a really great scene because you see him being outed live on the news show. He's being hit with hard questions. He doesn't want to answer them. He can't answer them. And he's just looking around, trying to escape. And then eventually he kind of like runs off. And so we know that he is in a full panic at this point. And while this is happening to Magnus, we have Honor at Magnus's house talking to his wife, and I think we learned that Magnus was adopted into that family, or they fostered him, whatever, and so that's why he's so close with him. And so he's really asking the wife about their history of adopting and fostering teenage boys, and he is with her when she sees what is happening to Magnus, and so he is asked to leave, and then he is kind of trying to figure out what is your next step from here. So for the fifth major plot point, we have Kata drugged and kidnapped. As a result of outing Magnus on TV and then having her request to investigate Magnus being denied, she uses the results of the news show. She goes to the state prosecutor to get this official approval to investigate Magnus, and she is actually walking into a trap. So we see her go to Peter's house, and she is basically walking him through everything. He's like, we can get this approved. I'm going to call this judge. And he actually walks out of the room to make the call. And this was the first red flag because why would he not make the call in front of Kata? And so he comes back, tells her that, it's been approved, let's have a drink. And she's actually being drugged. And so he is trying to get rid of Kata. And so while all of this is happening, Magnus actually goes to Peter's house and he's freaking out, he's panicking, and it is revealed that Magnus had financial troubles and he basically was paid to keep silent and to kind of manipulate the police report and all of the stuff that was being done as far as investigation into Vahalla to kind of keep Peter's name clean and then also keep his name out of it since Magnus was part of the investigation as far as the police report and looking into Tommy and all of that stuff. The kids had said that there was another person who would come to the school and abuse them, and so that person was Peter. And so obviously this has really negative implications for all of them because they covered up the abuse of children. So Magnus is freaking out. He's like, I just took the money, whatever. And then Peter's kind of like, no, you took the money, but you also covered up this crime. I didn't force you to do this. And so he gets Magnus to leave, but Magnus, as he's leaving, he sees and recognizes Kata's jacket, and so he knows that something is off. He goes out, and then we see Peter taking Kata's body to the garage. He's putting her into a boat, and then we see him opening his garage, and Magnus is there, and he's confronting Peter about Kata, and then he himself gets attacked. We also see that Honor, I think he was supposed to actually leave the country. The job was done. They had figured out who was responsible, whatever. And so at this point, Honor and Kata, they're kind of working off the books to actually finish the investigation. And so Honor decides to stay in the country and he's continuing to look into this, and he realizes right away that something's wrong, that they need to be careful. And so he realizes that he hadn't heard from Kata because she had gone to him with the evidence on Magnus and he didn't believe it. And so he's looking for her and he finds out that she went to the state prosecutor and he had actually been talking to someone else who was abused. I don't know if he was abused at Valhalla, but he was abused in the same way as those kids. And so he is able to identify who that person was that was going to Valhalla to abuse the kids. He identifies that person as Peter. And so when he finds out that Kata went to Peter's house, the state prosecutor's house, he knows that she's in deep trouble. And so we see Peter take Kata to the harbor. He's planning to dump her body into the river since she's drugged and won't be able to properly swim up to the surface and rescue herself. And so Honor goes to the harbor. Kata is able to kind of come out of her drug state just a little bit and defend herself. He hits Peter with a wrench because there had been a guy who noticed Peter coming late to the harbor, tried to strike up a conversation with him, but Peter basically ran that guy off, and that was a moment for Kata to kind of strike out at Peter and get away. And so we see her kind of trying to hide in the boatyard or whatever, and we see this moment where Honor comes to the scene. He is looking for her, and then Peter is able to sneak up on him and stab him. They get into a fight. We see Katta hear Honor call out for her. She ends up tackling Peter as he's about to like beat up Honor or whatever, and so she rescues him, and then Peter starts trying to drag Katta to attack her and throw her in the river, but Honor tackles him and they both fall in the river, and so Katta has to get herself up and get into the water to rescue Honor because one is wounded, like he's been stabbed, and then he's probably being dragged down or whatever by Peter, and so he's very lucky that she jumped in to rescue him because even he said as they came to the surface and they found safety that he just couldn't find the surface, and so he was getting tired and he couldn't save himself, and so they were each other's rescuers in that moment, and they were able to kind of tie up all of the loose ends in the case, and so that is how the season ended. One thing I do want to highlight is that Katta was branded as all of the Vahalla victims were, and so she has this weird shaped scar on her wrist, and so we will see her obviously have to deal with the implications of what that means to be marked in that way and how close to death she was and all of that, and so that is where this season ended. So to go ahead and wrap up this episode, I'm not sure if there's going to be a season 2, but I really enjoyed season 1. I thought it was really fast paced. I was definitely on my toes trying to figure out what was happening, who the real culprit was, and all of this stuff. And so I don't think anything was super obvious to where you could just guess who was responsible right away. I feel like there were a lot of twists and turns along the way, and as the season progressed, and so I was really glad that I took the time to watch this TV show. I think I had initially started it maybe I don't know how long ago, but I had started and I never really finished the first episode. And so because I had watched Chestnut Man, I went back to this show and finished it. And I'm really glad that I did that because this was right up my alley as far as the shows that I like watching, because I am into watching crime, thriller, and kind of like investigative TV shows. And so, yeah, this was definitely a good watch. And so I hope that this podcast episode got you interested in the Vahalla murders as well. So if you haven't watched the full season, go ahead and definitely check it out. And yeah, so let's go ahead and wrap up this episode. Thank you guys for listening, and I'll see you in the next one.